Apple just announced the brand new iPad Air 4, and there's many reasons to buy one, but there's also a few things that Apple conveniently left out, which you definitely have to be aware of before ordering. These things will literally stop many of you from buying one and make the iPad Air 4 not worth it depending on what you do. I know at least a few of these will surprise all of you as they surprised us when we figured them out. Personally, I think that many people will be better off buying a used or refurbished 2018 iPad Pro for the same amount or possibly even less money, which I'll leave some links to down in the description, or possibly spending the extra money and getting a lot more features with a 2020 iPad Pro. In this video, I'll tell you not only what you'll be missing out on, but also what you'll gain with the new iPad Air if you decide to buy it, so that you can make an informed decision that you won't regret in the future. On the outside, the iPad Air 4 looks almost identical to the 2018 iPad Pro. It's very slightly thicker but also lighter. The only visible difference to the trained eye is that the power button is larger, and that's because it's using Apple's new Touch ID that is embedded into the power button. The screen is slightly smaller at 10.9 inches instead of 11, and the resolution is dropped by just a few pixels to match. You won't notice this in the real world, and I feel like the only reason Apple did that is to separate it from their 11-inch iPad Pro. It's also fully laminated with P3 color with True Tone and the same gray anti-reflectivity coating, so almost everything is the same, but there are two specific things that changed, which are a deal breaker for me, but let's stick to the positives before we get into the negatives. Thankfully, Apple didn't ditch the quad stereo speakers, which are a massive upgrade for playing games and watching movies. Along with that, it also takes USB Type-C, it has support for the new Magic Keyboard, which is overpriced but I still absolutely love, and it now supports the Apple Pencil 2, which also means if you have the first-gen Pencil, you'll need to buy the new one. The camera on the back looks identical to the 2018 iPad Pro, but for some reason, Apple didn't include the quad LED flash, which is actually very handy for scanning documents. The front camera is still 7 megapixels, but it's also missing true depth sensors, so you won't have access to the Memoji, Animoji, or the portrait lighting features. The other interesting omission is the 5 microphones that sounded great for FaceTime calls. Now there's only 2 microphones. Of course, we'll have to see how much of a difference we have between the speakers, the cameras, and the mics in our hands-on comparison against the iPad Pro, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. There's also a few things that it does better than the iPad Pro, but since I started on the downsides already, let's get into the biggest disappointments. First, let's start with the most obvious one, no Face ID. Touch ID is fine, but Face ID on the iPad Pro is so convenient. From auto-unlocking it by just pressing on the keyboard to logging into apps and using Safari autofill without ever having to stop what I am doing is fantastic, and Touch ID is definitely a step back. The second is the lack of ProMotion, which is a shame. Having that 120Hz fluid display is one of the key features that really stands out on the iPad Pros. Not only does it make the iPad feel super smooth and responsive, but it also allows the refresh rate to drop down to match your content. So if you're watching a movie, it runs at 24 frames per second, which looks like the director intended, and it actually saves battery life at the same time. ProMotion is also what makes the iPad Pro by far the best tablet to write or draw on, with latency so low that it's not even noticeable since the iPad Pro reads the pencil's location 240 times per second. The iPad Air's 60Hz screen will have more than double the latency, so basically the same performance as the iPad Pro from 2016. The other common spec with the 2016 iPad Pro is the display brightness. The 2017 iPad Pros and newer all support 600 nits of brightness, which is 20% brighter than the new Air. Not only is that really handy in bright rooms or outdoors, but it also enables HDR video, which makes for a really nice viewing experience. With this new Air, you'll not only miss out on the darker, more detailed shadows and having brighter, more realistic highlights, but it will also use more power with the display refreshing more than twice as often as it needs to. Now comes the really weird part, which I didn't expect, and that is the performance of the A14 Bionic processor. We were surprised to see that Apple put the same processor that will come in the iPhone 12 into this mid-spec tablet, which will be the first ever 5nm processor on the market with 11.8 billion transistors, which is about 40% more than before. Apple mentioned that it's 40% faster than the previous CPU, and the graphics chip is 30% faster, which is a really good improvement. When we heard the specs, we figured that the new iPad Air will have a few downsides, but having that new processor will make it a smart buy to future-proof it, and it will perform better than the older Pros, but actually that is not the case. Those performance improvements were based on the previous iPad Air, so we started to do the math ourselves, and in Geekbench 5 CPU tests, we should get a multi-core score of about 4,000, which is respectable, obviously beating out the A12 and the previous Air, but looking closer, it is still about 15% slower than the iPad Pro from 2 years ago. Onto graphics, we should see a Metal score of about 6,000, which once again is a good improvement compared to before, but it's not only slower than the 2018 iPad Pro, as you're probably expecting by now, which by the way is over 50% faster, but even the 2017 10.5-inch iPad Pro looks to be potentially slightly faster, and then of course the 2020 is at the very top with that A12Z. Now, of course, we don't know which test Apple was going off of, and the real world tests could be different, which we'll do a wide variety of tests once we get it in, so make sure to ring that notification bell. So how in the world can a 2 or even a 3-year-old iPad, which could be bought for cheaper than the new Air, be performing so well despite their much older processors? Well, those use X series processors, which are designed for tablets with more graphics and CPU cores. For example, the new A14 Bionic has a 6-core processor, which has 4 high-efficiency cores and 2 high-performance cores, while the A12X in that 2018 iPad Pro has an 8-core processor that doubles the high-performance cores. The same thing goes for graphics, with the A14 featuring 4-core graphics instead of 7 or 8 in the newer iPad Pros, so that's how the old ones are actually still faster. Now with that 5nm design and less CPU and GPU cores, we should also be seeing better battery performance, but for some reason Apple is still advertising the same 10 hours of battery life. I know that lack of the ProMotion does have some effect, but I guess we'll have to do a real-world battery life test when we get it in. Now the new iPad Air does have a few improvements over that 2018 iPad Pro, like the new color options, which you won't get, and it also has Wi-Fi 6, but overall I would much rather buy a used or refurbished 2018 iPad Pro for a similar price and enjoy having HDR, a brighter display, having a flash for documents, having a much smoother experience with the ProMotion display, and using the Apple Pencil. And with that, the very convenient and quick Face ID. And on top of all of that, we have the much faster CPU for productivity and gaming. Now, for those of you who don't want to buy a used or refurbished iPad, there's also the 2020 iPad Pro, which also has Wi-Fi 6, not those colors, but it comes with more improvements and at about $150 to $200 more. For that extra cash, you get all of the benefits of the 2018 model, but in a brand new device that also gets more and better cameras, gets LiDAR, has faster CPU and GPU, with potentially double the RAM and double the base storage, which is, I think, the sweet spot for most people. If 64 gigabytes isn't enough for you on the Air, you have to spend $150 more to get 256 gigabytes, so that's only about $50 away from a new 128 gigabyte Pro. So now that you know the full story, it's going to be up to you to see if the iPad Air 4 is worth it, or if all of the extras that come with even the older iPad Pros make those a much better choice. Let me know what you think and why in the comments section. I'll go ahead and leave links to all of the models, including the refurb ones, down in the video description, along with links to this sweet ultra soft premium Max Tech shirt. Thank you guys for your support. Make sure to click that subscribe button above, as we're going to be doing a ton of hands-on comparisons as soon as we get it in. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.